Hello. So today we're going to be doing solving absolute value equations, and you have to remember the concept of the absolute value that we did earlier in the chapter. So absolute values are positive numbers or zero. That's the distance away from zero. When you solve with an equation or an inequality, you need to first isolate the absolute value. So that's step one. We're going to isolate the absolute value just like we would isolate x by using inverse operations. So that's add when you see subtraction, you multiply when you see division, and so forth. All right, then you need to decide, is the number that it's equal to either positive, negative, or zero? If the number is positive, then you're going to split it into two equations, and you're going to solve both of those equations. If the number is negative, you should remember that absolute values can't be negative, so therefore you'll have no solution. If the number is zero, then you're just going to have only one equation, and you just solve that as it is. Okay, so we're going to do some examples together, and some examples you're going to try on your own. All right, so number one, isolate the absolute value. That means make sure that the absolute value is the only thing on the left side of the equation. So if that's the case, then we don't really have to do step one, because that's already by itself. This absolute value is the only thing on the left side of the equation. So I'm going to look at my number 12. It's positive. Since it's positive, I'm going to split it into two equations. The way that you do that is you keep x minus 3 the same. One time it's equal to positive 12, another time it's equal to negative 12. And then you're just going to treat it like two separate equations, and you just solve them like normal. So one answer is x equals 15. Another answer is x equals negative 9. And those are my two solutions. All right, problem number 2. Is the absolute value the only thing on the left side of the equation? Yep. So I can skip step 1. Now I look at my number 7. Is it positive? Yes. So since it is, I'm going to split it into two equations. They both say 5 minus 3x. One time it's going to equal 7. One time it's going to equal negative 7. Then you just solve like normal. So we're going to subtract 5. We get negative 3x equals 2. Then we're going to divide by negative 3. So we get x equals negative 2/3. For the other half of the equation, we're going to, again, subtract 5. We get negative 3x equals negative 12. And when we divide by negative 3, we get x equals 4. So my two solutions are 4 and negative 2/3. All right, number 3, this one we do actually have to do the first step because the absolute value is not the only thing on the left side of the equation. There's this plus 6. So isolate means, back up here, isolate the absolute value. I need to get rid of my plus 6. So to undo that, I'm going to subtract it. Now I still have absolute value of x minus 5. 9 minus 6 is 3. So now ask yourself, is the absolute value the only thing on the left side of the equation? Since it is, now I can go on to step 2. So step 2 is decide is my number positive, negative, or 0. 3 is positive, so I've got x minus 5 equals 3. X minus 5 equals negative 3. Then you're just going to solve your two equations. So one answer is x equals 8. The other answer is x equals 2. In this one, I also need to do step 1 because I don't have the absolute value isolated yet. There's that 2 there. So what is the 2 doing? It's being multiplied, so to undo it, the inverse operation is to divide. So now I can cancel out my 2. I have absolute value of 3x minus 1 equals 4. So now is the absolute value all by itself on the left side of the equation? Yes. Since it's isolated, now I want to split up into two equations. All right, the reason why you're splitting into two equations is because on a number line there are two values that are 4 units away from 0. One of them is positive 4, one of them is negative 4. All right, so now we're just going to solve. We get 3x equals 5, and x equals 5 over 3. And then the other one, we're going to add 1. 3x equals negative 3, and x equals negative 1. Okay? So flip over to the other side. If you need to go back or rewind or pause, then go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving on. So we're going to do a few more together, and I'm going to have you try some more on your own. All right, so in number 5, is the absolute value all by itself? No, we've got the plus 6 and the negative 3 to get rid of. So we're going to first undo the plus 6. This gives us negative 3, absolute value of 2x plus 1 equals negative 3. Then I still don't have it isolated, so I need to undo this. These are being multiplied, so to undo multiplication, we divide. So we have absolute value of 2x plus 1 equals 1. All right, now you ask yourself, is the absolute value by itself? Yes. Is this number positive? Yes. So now I'm going to split 2x plus 1 equals positive 1, or 2x plus 1 equals negative 1. All right, so now you solve, you get 2x equals 0. Divide by 2, we get x equals 0. And then my other solution is 2x equals negative 2, so when I divide by 2, I get negative 1. So one answer is 0, the other answer is negative 1. Number 6, absolute value is not by itself yet, so I need to undo the plus 8 first by subtracting. So I have negative absolute value of 8x minus 5 equals negative 3. This number is really a negative 1, and it's being multiplied. So to undo it, I divide by negative 1. This gives me absolute value of 8x minus 5 equals positive 3. So now I look at my number. Is that value positive? Since it is, we're going to split it up. 8x minus 5 equals 3, and 8x minus 5 equals negative 3. Now you're going to solve. So if I add 5, I get 8x equals 8. Divide by 8, and one answer is x equals 1. Here I'm going to add 5, and I get 8x equals 2. And then if I divide by 8, I get 1/4. If you use your calculator, you'll get 0.25, and if you change it to a fraction, then you'll get 1/4. All right, so for the rest of these, we're going to do the odds together. All right, so number 7, absolute value is not isolated. But don't add 5 and 3 together, because 3 is being multiplied, and here you're adding. So first you want to undo the 5. So now you still have a 3 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 3. Then to undo multiplication, you divide, so you get absolute value of x minus 4 equals 1. Now the absolute value is all by itself. All right, so split it into 2 separate equations. X minus 4 equals 1, x minus 4 equals negative 1. Then solve. So one answer is x equals 5, and another answer is x equals 3. All right, so we're going to keep going with the odds. This is 6 plus, not 6 times. Notice when the 3 was right next to it, we assume that's multiplication. But here there's a plus sign, so we know that these are being added, and the 6 is positive, so we want to undo that by subtracting. So we just get absolute value of 3 minus 2x equals 2. Since 2 is positive, you split it into 2 equations. 3 minus 2x equals 2. 3 minus 2x equals negative 2. Now just solve. So we're going to subtract 3. Negative 2x equals negative 1. When I divide by a negative, the negatives cancel, so I get x equals positive 1/2. Here I subtract 3, I get negative 2x equals negative 5. And then when I divide, I get 5/2. All right, number 11. So I want to undo a negative 3. How do you undo a negative 3? You add 3. So I have 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals negative 4. I'm going to divide by 2. I get absolute value of x minus 4 equals negative 2. So hopefully you see this problem is a little different. As a reminder, back to our second step, it says if it's positive, you split the problem into 2 equations and you solve both. But that number is not positive. If it's negative, then it's no solution, because an absolute value of something can never be equal to a negative. So here we're just going to say no solution. And you're all done. You don't have to split it into two equations. Usually you're not going to see where it's equal to 0, but every once in a while you might get a problem that does that. All right, so here's what I want you to do for problems 8, 10, and 12. I want you to try 8, 10, and 12 on your own. Pause the video, and then when you unpause it, you can see what the answers are. All right, so do these on your own. And then here's the solutions to 8 and 10 and 12. All right, and your secret word of the day, make sure you write that down somewhere. Today's secret word is diamond.